And Sarah, I want to thank you again for that beautiful offertory. It's so great to have everybody sing, and it was just a wonderful moment of communion. Thank you. Our gospel lesson today comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 6, verses 14 through 29. And we have been hearing several stories about Jesus' miraculous healing and provision. And you might say, and now for something completely different. King Herod heard of it, for Jesus' name had become known. Some were saying, John the Baptist has been raised from the dead, and for this reason these powers are at work in him. But others said it is Elijah, and others said it is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard of it, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. For Herod himself had sent men who arrested John, bound him, and put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because Herod had married her. For John had been telling Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. And Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to kill him, but she could not, for Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he protected him. When he heard him, he was greatly perplexed, yet he liked to listen to John. But an opportunity came when Herod, on his birthday, gave a banquet for his courtiers and officers and for the leaders of Galilee. When his daughter Herodias, also known as Salome, came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, ask me whatever you wish, and I will give it. And he solemnly swore to her, whatever you ask me, I will give you even half of my kingdom. She went out and said to her mother, what should I ask for? And her mother replied, the head of John the Baptizer. Immediately she rushed back to the king and requested, I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter. The king was deeply grieved, yet out of regard for his oaths and for his guests, he did not want to refuse her. Immediately the king sent a soldier of the guard with orders to bring John's head. He went and beheaded him in prison, brought his head on a platter, and gave it to the girl. Then the girl gave it to her mother. When his disciples heard about it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. This is the good news of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Would you please pray with me? Gracious and loving God, may these words of my mouth, this meditation from my heart, be filled with your spirit and filled with your truth, and may be heard with open ears and open hearts and open minds, and bring us a message that we need to hear for our lives today, for our world today, for our church today, for your eternal kingdom. Speaking truth to power. That's a phrase that perhaps you've heard before. Maybe you've heard it used quite a bit recently. Well, it's a concept that's been around for a very long time. The phrase, speaking truth to power, apparently was coined in the middle of the 50s, in the middle of the Cold War, by the American Friends, the Quakers, in a pamphlet that they wrote entitled Speaking Truth to Power. And in that pamphlet, they talked about how the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union would never be solved by fighting a war, even though that was the assumed go-to final solution for the heightened problems that were happening at that time. Instead, the Friends said, what we need to do, one of us, a group of us, what Christians need to do is speak truth to power. What they meant was that it's important for us to remember that power corrupts. And power corrupts universally. And every government has its problems. Every government is guilty of intolerance and injustice and hypocrisy and doing whatever it can to keep itself in power. Nobody is really any better than any other because power corrupts universally. And if we start to call out every government and the way that they are abusing power, then we will puncture whatever propaganda we've been taught about who's right and who's wrong. And we, as all of us people, will be able to come together and be in peace, especially as we speak truth to power without anger, if we do it without ego, if we do it without following through with some act of aggression or oppression. If we speak in peace but speak courageously, we will bring about true peace. Maybe a simpler way to explain that is speaking truth to power is kind of like that little boy in that story of the emperor's new clothes, who sees the emperor walk by, and he's the one who exposes, literally, the fact that the emperor really has nothing, period. That's speaking truth to power. The only difference, or what I would add, is that in the real world, so often when we speak truth to power, it comes at a very, very dear price. We have a very profound example in our gospel reading today, where we hear that John the Baptist has done more than just hang out in the wilderness, helping people repent of their sins. He's also been speaking truth to power. He's been telling the king, King Herod, that he did a very bad thing, in divorcing his wife and then marrying the wife of his brother. Not only was this profoundly against Jewish law, but it also caused a big civil war as his ex-wife's family went to war against the Galileans. It was a very costly war, an irresponsible and unnecessary war. It was exactly the opposite of what a king should be doing to protect his people. But because he was speaking out against power, speaking against the king, he was put in prison and then eventually beheaded. The only person in the Bible who met a grislier end for speaking truth to power was Jesus, who not only was speaking out against the perversions of the temple and the ways that the temple authorities would pervert purity rules to let the poor not be able to come into the temple, but he was also speaking out that there was indeed this kingdom that was superior to Rome, that was on its way. In fact, it was already here. And so Jesus died a traitor's death, which was crucifixion, the worst possible way of dying that the ancient world could imagine. Yes, it's in our history, all over our history. It's in our Bible. We as Christians, we as Jesus followers, are called to speak truth to power. Courageously, peacefully, not aggressively, even though it may come at a very dear price. And it can be really, really scary. Some of our greatest Christian heroes are those who have spoken truth to power. There's Sir Thomas More, who was a great philosopher and writer and leader and counselor of Henry VIII, but he refused, like John, to accept the fact that Henry wanted to divorce his wife and marry someone new so that he could fulfill his desires of starting the church. Thomas said, no, I don't agree with that, and Thomas lost his head. There was Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the great Lutheran pastor and theologian who in World War II saw what was going on in Germany at the very early part, and Hitler was doing something really bad, not only in his country, but turning the church into this fawning vehicle of Hitler's. And he spoke out against this, and eventually not only was speaking out, but was willing to take the next step and get involved in an assassination plot, and as a result, he was hung. He was hung only a week before the Allies came in to free and end the whole World War. In fact, Bonhoeffer very well could have been hearing the Allies coming to save him. The Germans very cruelly put him to death. We have Dr. Martin Luther King, who was not only assassinated in the midst of his work on speaking courageously against truth to power about the continuing racism that pervaded in this country, very cruel racism that pervaded, but not only that, but his life was filled with beatings and imprisonments and bombings to his home and all sorts of acts of terror. Closer to home, in the United Methodist denomination, there are many pastors who, in the last few decades, have lost their orders because they spoke truth to power and said the LGBTQ community are fully beloved children of God, have full access to everything that God provides, including marriage. And as they performed gay weddings, they would be out of a job. But they spoke truth to power. And I'm sure many of you, for any number of reasons, have felt that fear when you have felt compelled to stand up and speak truth to power, speak against what the status quo says is true, and you know something differently. You might lose your job, you might lose your family. It can be very difficult. But that's one of the things that we're called to do. Because in addition to all the difficulty, God does give us courage, God does give us companionship amongst one another, companionship with God. And God gives us a sense that God gives us a sense of how we need to do it in each and every time and in each and every circumstance. Today, I think we are hearing a lot of talk about the importance of speaking truth to power. And especially since November 2016, I don't know about you, but so often it feels to me that we aren't speaking truth to power, we're more yelling truth to power. And no matter what side of the aisle we might be on, we're just living in this state of chaos, this state of yelling, this state of saying, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, I'm right, thinking that somehow that's going to change things. That that's somehow what the Bible is talking to us about. I have a few thoughts personally about how I think Christians today are called to speak truth to power. One, I think that we need to speak our truth with power with a lot of humility and a lot of honesty. Because it's really easy to say, you did all these bad things. But the truth is, all of us are liable, and all of us have contributed to the problems we now face. I think especially right now of the issue about immigration and family separations and how this white anger against those who are doing this and how evil that is, well, those who are yelling that forget that this problem has been going on forever, and people on both sides of the aisle have been doing terrible things to immigrants, and whether or not they're in power or people of color being mistreated, it doesn't just stop at one political party. All of us have done something to contribute to where we are. And all of us can wake up, ask repentance, and decide we all want to commit to doing something different. In fact, I think what I want to start doing in our prayer time is having a little time for all of us to just spend some time repenting for all the things that we've done or that we don't even know that we've done. Acknowledging that all of us are responsible as we move ahead trying to create a better world. Secondly, I think we need to speak truth to power with humor. Big surprise? Humor is such a powerful tool in so many ways. And it's a powerful way to satirize those in power. It's a powerful way that we can make fun of ourselves as we try to find our way into that humility and into that honest place. And it's also a great way of just keeping our spirits up, because indeed, speaking truth to power is hard work. Right after my dad died, just a few days after he died, there was going to be a March for Science. This was in late April of last year. And I really had wanted to participate, but I was grieving my dad's death, and I felt like I just needed something to lift up my spirits. So I got into my craw to go to the March for Science that was going to be held in Cedar Falls. They were being held all over the country. And I came dressed in this real flowery polyester dress from the 70s. And I put on like a 70s wig and some cat-eye glasses. And I made a huge batch of macaroni and cheese in a giant casserole. And I stuck a sign in it that said, "Science makes this hot dish possible." And I wandered around the thing, and it not only made me feel good, but it also just added a sense of buoyancy in the important things, and the fear, and whatever else people were trying to do in gathering to speak truth to that, to speaking that truth to power. Finally, I would invite us all, especially those of us who are Anglo middle class, to also adopt a spirit of true hope in our work, not a spirit of hurry. One of my favorite books from seminary is a book called The Feminist Ethic of Risk by Dr. Sharon Welch. And in that book, she talks about how people, middle class, especially middle class Anglo people, can be really impatient when it comes to doing the hard work of justice, the hard work of speaking truth to power, really changing our world in a peaceful way. We're so used to having the resources we need to get things done quick. And if things don't get done quick, we just move on to the next thing. It's sort of like watching a sitcom. If something doesn't happen, the problem doesn't get solved in 30 minutes, it's never going to get solved, so move on. She looks at the anti-nuclear, the denuclearization push that happened in the 80s, this giant massive march for ending the arms race. And once people started realizing how tough and complex that was, people just started to move on. She says we can't do that. We have to find new narratives that keep us in the fight, keep us working, keep us hopeful, even though at best so often the work of speaking truth to power and creating the world that God dreams of is 2 steps forward and 1.5 steps back. She suggests that we start looking at the narratives, at the fiction of African American novelists. We have female novelists like Toni Morrison and Alice Walker, who write stories about women and families who live in a world where they are oppressed because they're African Americans in this culture. They've been oppressed for generations. And yet they keep working, inching towards doing what they can to change the world. Living life with joy and meaning, even though there's so much heartbreak. And also seeing it as their duty to make space for the next generation to keep that journey going. I see so often in what I hear from my friends getting so disheartened and so angry that things aren't changing yet and just wanting to throw in the towel. And that's the last kind of attitude, not only that we should have, but the Bible wants us to have. Because let's face it, the Bible is this thick. If we got it right away, it would just be a pamphlet. If we'd be doing something else this Sunday morning. Right? So seriously, I invite us to think about that, about how we are called to speak truth to power, how frightening that is, how dear that can be, how important it is, how possible it is, and how much perhaps God is calling us, inviting us to do that, maybe deeply inside, we truly want to go there. I'd like to share with you a poem by the Caribbean American poet and activist June Jordan. And this is my blessing for us for today. And for ourselves, the intrinsic purpose is to reach and remember, and to declare our commitment to all the living, without deceit and without fear and without reservation. We do what we can, and by doing it, we keep ourselves trusting, which is to say vulnerable. And more than that, what can anyone else